It started the moment she stepped on the plane, not with words, but with a look, a flicker of doubt in the flight attendant's eyes, a hesitation before scanning her ticket, a forced smile that didn't quite hide the truth. "You don't belong here." She was black, sitting in first class, a combination some people just couldn't accept. It didn't matter that she paid for her seat, that she had every right to be there. To them, she was out of place. And in their world, people like her needed to be put back in line. The humiliation started small. A delay, a missing drink, a quiet dismissal. But soon, it turned into something much worse. The crew disrespected her. The passengers laughed, and mile by mile, they stripped her of her dignity. No one stood up for her. No one cared. But the thing about power? It doesn't always belong to the people who think they have it. By the time this flight lands, the rules will change. And the ones who enjoyed her suffering, they'll wish they had stayed silent. Do you think she should have fought back? What would you have done in her place? Let us know in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching from today? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more shocking stories where karma always finds its way. Lisa Carter stepped onto the jet bridge, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she adjusted the strap of her designer handbag. It had been a long year, filled with challenges and victories, and today was a day she had promised herself, a day to celebrate her hard-earned success with a well-deserved first-class experience. Clutched in her perfectly manicured fingers was a sleek, embossed boarding pass that read Seat 1A, First Class. She exhaled with quiet satisfaction, glancing at the polished metal surface of the aircraft ahead. As she stepped into the cabin, the crisp, cool air conditioning greeted her, carrying the faint scent of leather and citrus-scented disinfectant. The interior gleamed, plush cream-colored seats, gold-accented reading lamps, and the hushed murmur of passengers settling in. Lisa took a slow breath, savoring the moment. This was her reward. However, not everyone felt the same way. From across the cabin, Amanda Brooks stiffened as her gaze landed on Lisa. Years of working in luxury aviation had trained Amanda to spot certain types, those who belonged and those who didn't. Lisa Carter, in Amanda's mind, fell into the latter category. Her skin was smooth, radiant, but unmistakably brown. Her confidence was effortless, yet Amanda saw it as arrogance. She had seen wealthy passengers before, but something about Lisa rubbed her the wrong way. No way she belongs here, Amanda thought, pursing her lips. Amanda's hands twitched at her sides as Lisa stepped forward, gliding past other passengers who barely spared her a glance. But Amanda's sharp eyes followed her every move, searching for some mistake, some reason to correct her. And then it came, the moment Lisa reached her seat. "Excuse me," Amanda's voice was sugar-coated, dripping with the kind of politeness that wasn't meant to be genuine. "I believe you may have taken a wrong turn. First class is reserved for premium guests." Lisa paused mid-motion as she reached to stow her bag in the overhead bin. Her expression remained poised, unreadable. She turned slowly to face Amanda, then, without hesitation, held up her boarding pass. "Seat 1A, First Class," Lisa said, her tone measured but firm. Amanda's eyes flicked down to the ticket, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she regained composure. She reached out and plucked the pass from Lisa's fingers with unnecessary force, scanning it as if expecting it to reveal a forgery. Lisa arched a brow. "Is there a problem?" Amanda forced a chuckle, handing the pass back. "No mistake," she said, but the brightness in her voice didn't reach her cold, assessing gaze. "I just wanted to double-check." Lisa slid into her seat, unfazed. She had spent years in boardrooms filled with men who had underestimated her, men who assumed she was someone's assistant or a secretary rather than the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. This was nothing new. Yet Amanda wasn't done. She turned sharply, heading toward the front galley where another flight attendant, Sophie, was checking pre-flight preparations. "Did you see the woman in 1A?" Amanda whispered, her voice tinged with irritation. Sophie barely glanced up. "Yeah? What about her?" Amanda scoffed. "Something's off. You think she actually paid for that seat?" Sophie's brow furrowed. "Amanda, she had a valid boarding pass." Who cares? Amanda's nails dug into her palm. I care because this is a luxury airline, and we're expected to maintain standards. Sophie sighed, recognizing that Amanda wasn't going to let this go. She had seen this behavior before, the subtle microaggressions, the disbelief that certain people could afford first-class luxury. But she knew better than to argue. Amanda squared her shoulders, exhaling sharply. I'm keeping an eye on her, she muttered before stepping back into the cabin. Lisa, meanwhile, had settled into her seat, crossing her legs as she scrolled through her phone. She could feel Amanda's lingering gaze, but she didn't acknowledge it. She had encountered Amandas all her life, gatekeepers who didn't believe she belonged, who sought to undermine her presence. She smiled slightly, knowing one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Lisa barely had time to breathe before Amanda returned, her polished heels clicking with an air of manufactured authority. The flight was filling up, passengers murmuring as they settled into their seats. Lisa kept her focus on her phone, her instincts telling her that the woman hadn't finished whatever petty game she had in mind. Ma'am, Amanda's voice rang out, loud enough to turn heads. I need to check your ticket again. Lisa lifted her gaze, her patience thinning. You already did, she replied, her voice even. Amanda's smile was tight, practiced. Just a routine verification. Lisa exhaled and handed over the pass once more. But this time, Amanda didn't merely glance at it. Instead, she held it up between two fingers like it was something filthy, something undeserving of being in her presence. Her lips twisted as she inspected it with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping it front and back. Amanda mused. You're sure this is yours? Lisa's jaw clenched. I booked this seat weeks ago. First class. Paid in full. Amanda let out a patronizing chuckle, her head tilting slightly. Oh, I see, she said, voice dripping with faux sympathy. Must have been some kind of mix-up. Lisa reached for her ticket, but Amanda stepped back, just enough to keep it out of reach. Lisa's fingers curled into her palm. Passengers were watching now, heads turning, a few whispers passing between them. Amanda seized the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, voice light, airy, performative. It seems we have a little seating confusion. I'll just sort this out. Lisa felt something in her stomach drop. She knew what this was. She had seen it before, felt it before, that slow, creeping humiliation, carefully engineered. Amanda held up Lisa's ticket as if it were evidence in a courtroom. Then, with deliberate slowness, she ripped it in half. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. Lisa's breath caught. Amanda smiled. There. Now it's not a problem anymore. Lisa forced herself to stay still, to keep her shoulders squared, her face unreadable. But she felt the weight of every stare, the unspoken judgments forming in real time. Now, Amanda continued, clapping her hands together like she had just solved an insignificant inconvenience. I'm sure we can find you a more suitable seat. Lisa exhaled through her nose, controlling the fire in her chest. I paid for that seat. Amanda blinked at her, feigning innocence. I'm sure you did, sweetheart, she cooed. But without a ticket, well, rules are rules. Someone snickered. Lisa caught movement from the corner of her eye, a man in a navy blue suit shaking his head with a smirk, as if entertained. Amanda turned toward a junior flight attendant lingering nearby. Sophie, why don't you help our guest find alternative accommodations? Lisa's throat felt tight, but she remained silent. She had no allies here. Sophie hesitated, eyes darting between Amanda and Lisa. Her lips parted as if she might object, but then she nodded, defeated. Of course. Amanda beamed. Wonderful. Lisa swallowed hard. She could already see where this was going. Sophie gestured toward the aisle. If you'll come with me, ma'am. Lisa stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary. A refusal lingered on her tongue. But what was the point? Her ticket was gone. Amanda had stripped her of her claim before the flight had even taken off. She stood. The moment she moved, Amanda's smug expression deepened, as if savoring her victory. Lisa followed Sophie down the aisle, her back straight, her steps measured. But with each stride, she felt the burning weight of eyes crawling over her. Passengers in first class turned to watch, some with curiosity, some with amusement, a few with quiet discomfort, but none with enough conviction to speak up. Lisa clenched her fists. Amanda had made a spectacle of her, and the show was only beginning. Lisa walked down the aisle with measured steps, suppressing the fire rising in her chest. She could feel Amanda's satisfaction burning into her back, could hear the faint chuckles of a few passengers who found her humiliation amusing. She had no allies here. She had no power. Not yet. As she reached the divider between first class and business, a sudden, sharp pain shot through her foot. Lisa gasped as a spiked heel crushed down on her instep, sending a jolt of agony through her leg. She stumbled, but caught herself on the seat beside her. "Oh dear," cooed a soft, insincere voice. Lisa looked up into the wide-eyed, mock-concerned face of Rachel, one of Amanda's favorite lackeys. "I didn't see you there." Rachel didn't move. She kept her weight pressed down for just a second too long before finally stepping back, her expression carefully blank. Lisa inhaled sharply, swallowing the pain. She wouldn't give them this satisfaction. Amanda's voice rang out behind her, as sweet as poison. "Be careful, Lisa. This is first class. We have very expensive shoes here." A few passengers snickered. Lisa forced her expression into neutrality, straightened, and continued walking. But the throbbing in her foot pulsed with every step. Sophie, the younger attendant, led her through the curtain separating the classes. We'll find you another seat." Her voice was soft, hesitant. She wasn't like Amanda, but that didn't make her an ally either. They reached economy, the space growing tighter, the air heavier with recycled breath. Sophie stopped near the very last row. Lisa's stomach clenched. "Here you go," Sophie said, gesturing toward the worst seat on the plane. Middle row, last section, directly across from the lavatory. The door was ajar, and even from where she stood, Lisa caught the rancid scent of old disinfectant and something worse beneath it. Lisa's nails dug into her palm. She knew Amanda had orchestrated this. This wasn't about a simple reassignment. It was punishment. Sophie looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. "I know it's not ideal, but it's the only available seat." Lisa's lips parted, an instinctual protest rising, but she stopped herself. She could already hear Amanda's voice in her head. "Complain, and I'll make it worse." Wordlessly, Lisa slid into the seat. The cushion was stiff, unyielding, a far cry from the plush luxury of first class. She adjusted her posture, trying not to breathe too deeply through her nose. Amanda suddenly appeared beside Sophie, her presence looming like a storm cloud. She leaned against the headrest of the seat beside Lisa, her smile sharp. "Settling in well?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. Lisa didn't answer. Amanda sighed dramatically. "I was just thinking, it's so strange that you lost your seat. First class is a place of exclusivity, after all." She tilted her head, watching Lisa closely. "Maybe it was never really meant for you." Lisa met Amanda's gaze head-on, refusing to break. She wouldn't cower, but Amanda didn't need her to. The flight attendant straightened and patted Lisa's shoulder, a mockingly familiar gesture that sent a chill down her spine. "Enjoy the flight, sweetheart." And with that, Amanda turned, her heels clicking as she disappeared into the aisle. She would not let Amanda win. Not in this way. Minutes passed, then an hour. The occasional glance from passengers held varying degrees of curiosity and amusement. Some whispered, others sneered, a few pretended not to notice. Lisa knew better than to expect sympathy. A familiar presence loomed over her shoulder. She didn't have to look up to know it was Amanda. The scent of her expensive perfume, a sharp floral mix, cut through the stale cabin air like a blade. Amanda let out a dramatic sigh. "Lisa, Lisa, Lisa," she mused, arms crossed. "I was thinking, since you're here in economy now, maybe you should make yourself useful." Lisa didn't respond. Amanda turned her head slightly, raising a brow at Sophie, who lingered nearby with an armful of used meal trays. Sophie hesitated. "Amanda, I don't." Amanda's gaze snapped to her. "Sophie." That was all it took. The younger flight attendant swallowed, then stepped forward, placing the trays on the fold-out table attached to Lisa's seat. Lisa glanced down at them, her expression unreadable. Amanda smirked. "We're a little understaffed today. Would you mind lending a hand?" The tone was falsely sweet, but the intention was razor-sharp. Lisa met Amanda's gaze, unmoving. Amanda leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough that only Lisa could hear. "I mean, since you were so desperate to stay in first class, maybe this is the best way to earn your keep." Lisa's fingers curled slightly, but she kept her composure. A few heads turned, passengers catching onto the exchange. Someone chuckled under their breath. A middle-aged woman in the adjacent row frowned slightly, shifting uncomfortably but saying nothing. Amanda tilted her head. "No, you don't want to help." She let out an exaggerated sigh. "That's a shame. I thought you'd appreciate the opportunity." Lisa finally spoke, her voice cool and steady. "I paid for my ticket. I don't work for you." Amanda's smile flickered just for a second before she recovered. "Oh, but I think you do," she murmured. "You see, the second you stepped onto my plane, you became my responsibility, and I decide how comfortable you are." Lisa didn't move. Amanda straightened, placing a hand on her hip. "Well, since you're not feeling helpful," she said, her voice carrying again, "I suppose we'll just have to make adjustments." Lisa braced herself, but she wasn't prepared for what happened next. Amanda reached over to the service cart and grabbed a small plastic cup filled halfway with orange juice. Her fingers curled around it, and for a split second, Lisa saw it coming, but she had nowhere to go. With a flick of her wrist, Amanda dumped the juice straight into Lisa's lap. The icy liquid soaked instantly into the fabric of Lisa's cream-colored dress, spreading in sticky rivulets down her thighs. A shocked gasp rippled through the nearest passengers. Someone let out a quiet snicker. Lisa inhaled sharply, her body rigid, the cold seeping into her skin. Amanda clucked her tongue, shaking her head in mock dismay. "Oh dear," she said lightly. "I swear my hand just slipped." The cabin was silent, except for the soft hum of the plane's engines and the faint murmur of whispers passing between passengers. Lisa stared straight ahead, her breath controlled, her pulse hammering beneath the surface. Amanda leaned in slightly, her voice like silk. "You know, I think orange really is your color." A stifled laugh came from a man across the aisle. Someone muttered something under their breath. A woman in the row ahead twisted slightly in her seat, but no one spoke up. Lisa sat frozen, the wet fabric clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Amanda straightened, flashing a satisfied smile. "Accidents happen, don't they?" she said sweetly. "But don't worry, I'm sure it'll dry eventually." Lisa exhaled slowly, forcing herself to keep her voice level. "You're pathetic." Amanda's eyes darkened, her jaw tightening for half a second before she laughed. "And you," she purred, "are exactly where you belong." Lisa remained still, refusing to let the humiliation sink its claws into her. Amanda gave one last smirk before turning on her heel, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked back toward the front of the plane. Sophie hesitated for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something, but Amanda's sharp glance made her shrink back. The quiet murmur of whispers spread through the cabin, but she refused to meet anyone's gaze. She could feel their eyes on her, watching, judging, amused. Across the aisle, a man in a navy suit smirked as he pulled out his phone. He lifted it casually, pretending to scroll, but the way he angled the camera told Lisa exactly what he was doing. The soft click of a photo being taken made her stomach tighten. "Unbelievable," he muttered, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those around him. He tapped at his screen a few times before leaning toward the man beside him. "Check this out. A beggar in first class. Thought she could fake her way in." Lisa clenched her fists beneath the fold-out tray. A second later, the familiar ding of a phone notification rang out, then another, and another. Laughter rippled through the cabin. Someone snorted. "Damn, that's viral material right there." Another passenger, a young woman with perfectly curled blonde hair, turned in her seat, holding up her own phone. "Wait, send me that." The caption is gold. Lisa forced herself to keep breathing, to stay in control, but she felt the rage simmering beneath her skin. She had been humiliated before, but never like this. A few seats away, a man in his late 40s reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and with a lazy flick of his wrist, tossed a crumpled bill toward Lisa's tray table. The $20 bill fluttered onto the edge before sliding to the floor. "Here, sweetheart," he drawled, his voice dripping with mock generosity. "Go buy yourself a real ticket next time." The laughter grew louder. Someone whistled. Another bill was thrown, this time by the blonde woman, who giggled behind her manicured fingers. Lisa's fingers curled into her palms so tightly her nails bit into her skin. Amanda, standing near the galley, watched it all unfold with a satisfied smirk. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She had set the stage, and now she was letting the passengers do the work for her. Lisa forced herself to move. She reached down, picked up the crumpled bills, and set them neatly on the tray table in front of her. Then she folded her hands over them and lifted her chin, her face betraying nothing. The laughter slowed, as if they had expected her to react, to break, to lash out. But she wouldn't give them that. Amanda clicked her tongue in mock disappointment. "Oh, Lisa, you really should say thank you. These people are just trying to help." Lisa met Amanda's gaze and, with deliberate slowness, smiled. Not the broken smile Amanda wanted, but something colder, sharper, more dangerous. Amanda's smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered. "Enjoy your flight," she chirped before turning on her heel, disappearing back toward first class. Lisa's fingers remained pressed against the crumpled bills on her tray table, the laughter still lingering like a stain in the air. The plane vibrated gently as it cruised through the sky, but inside her a storm raged. Every instinct screamed at her to fight back, to demand the respect she deserved. But she wasn't just up against Amanda anymore. She was up against a plane full of spectators who had decided that her suffering was their entertainment. She needed anyone to intervene. Taking a steady breath, Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. The sticky fabric of her dress clung uncomfortably to her thighs, but she ignored it. She turned toward the front of the plane, toward the cockpit. A few passengers murmured as she passed, their eyes still filled with amusement. One man whispered something to his seatmate, who stifled a chuckle. Lisa ignored them. She reached the galley near first class, where Amanda was casually chatting with another flight attendant. At the sight of Lisa, Amanda's lips curled upward. "Oh," she cooed, "decided to take me up on my offer to help clean trays?" Lisa didn't even glance at her. Instead, she looked past her, to the reinforced door of the cockpit. She raised a hand and knocked firmly. Amanda's amusement flickered into irritation. "Excuse me, what do you think you're?" The door cracked open slightly, revealing a man in his late 50s, silver hair neatly combed beneath his captain's hat. His expression was polite but impassive. "Yes." Lisa exhaled. "Captain, I need to report inappropriate behavior from a flight attendant. I've been harassed, humiliated," and Amanda let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh dear, now she's playing the victim." Lisa clenched her jaw. "I have the right to report this." The captain's gaze flicked toward Amanda, then back to Lisa. His face remained unreadable. "Miss, my crew is highly trained in handling passenger concerns. If there was an issue, I'm sure it was dealt with appropriately." Lisa's nails dug into her palms. "I was removed from my seat. My ticket was destroyed. I've been verbally harassed. That's not appropriate handling." The captain's expression didn't change. "Our flight attendants are given authority to make judgment calls for the safety and comfort of all passengers. If a decision was made, I trust it was necessary." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "You trust that humiliating me was necessary?" His gaze didn't waver. "If you have further concerns, you're welcome to file a formal complaint after we land." Lisa stared at him, waiting for any flicker of humanity, any hint of doubt. There was none. The door shut in her face. Amanda exhaled a breathy laugh. "Oh, Lisa," she mused, stepping closer until her voice was just for Lisa alone. "You really thought someone would save you?" Lisa's pulse pounded in her ears. Amanda leaned in further, her tone dropping to something colder, sharper. "You don't belong here." You never belonged here." Her lips barely moved. "You should be grateful I let you stay on this plane at all." Amanda straightened, smoothing the front of her uniform. "But don't worry. We'll be landing soon enough." She tilted her head. "Maybe you should just walk home from the airport. Seems more fitting for someone like you." Lisa moved back toward her seat, her head held high, but the weight of Amanda's words pressed against her skull. She was trapped in this nightmare. No one would help her. The crew was against her. The passengers had turned her humiliation into entertainment. And Amanda? She had made this into a personal crusade, a test of dominance Lisa refused to fail. As she lowered herself into her seat, she caught a glimpse of the crumpled $20 bill still sitting on the tray table. The man who had thrown it at her was watching with a smug grin, as if expecting her to finally take the handout. She curled her fingers into her lap, ignoring him. The plane had entered its final hour of flight. The cabin had settled, the flickering overhead lights casting a dim glow. But just as Lisa began to steel herself for the remaining time, she sensed it, a shift in energy. Amanda was coming back. Lisa didn't need to look up to know she was standing over her. The low murmur of voices around her had died down, replaced by a tense, expectant silence. Amanda cleared her throat dramatically. "Lisa, I've been thinking." Lisa exhaled slowly, keeping her gaze forward. "That's dangerous." Amanda chuckled. "You're funny, but I think we both know this has gotten a bit out of hand." She gestured vaguely toward Lisa's ruined dress, the money on the tray, the quiet, watching passengers. "I hate to see you suffer like this." Lisa finally looked up, her expression carefully blank. "Is that so?" Amanda smiled. "Of course. And honestly, I'm willing to put all of this behind us." Amanda tilted her head. "I'll even make sure the airline compensates you for the inconvenience." A few passengers exchanged glances. Lisa could hear the shift in their breathing, the way their amusement had turned to curiosity. Even they could sense a trap. Lisa's voice was cold. "What do you want?" Amanda's smile widened. "Oh, nothing much." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to be intimate, but loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "Just a little apology." Amanda sighed, shaking her head. "You've been quite disruptive, you know, causing a scene, making a mess." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to the sticky stain on Lisa's lap. "I think it would only be fair to acknowledge that you were in the wrong." Lisa inhaled through her nose. Amanda's voice softened to a dangerous purr. "Just say you're sorry, Lisa. Right here, in front of everyone." She stepped back, gesturing theatrically to the watching passengers. "And I promise, I'll leave you alone for the rest of the flight." Lisa's fingers twitched. She could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken challenge. Amanda wasn't just asking for an apology. She was demanding submission. Lisa's lips parted, but before she could speak, Amanda took it further. She gave a small, pitying smile. "Or, if you really want to make it convincing," her voice dropped into something honeyed and cruel, "you could get on your knees." A sharp gasp broke through the cabin. Someone muttered, "Oh, damn." A few snickers, a couple of hushed whispers. Amanda tilted her head, eyes glittering with satisfaction. "Go on, Lisa. Show everyone you can be humble." Lisa's body locked, her breath shallow, her muscles coiled. The disgust in her stomach was all-consuming, a roiling fire threatening to consume her from the inside. Amanda wanted to break her. The moment stretched too long. The waiting passengers held their breath, waiting for Lisa to cave. When she didn't move, Amanda's expression twisted into something colder. Then, before Lisa could react, Amanda slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. Lisa's head jerked to the side, the sting exploding across her cheek. A sharp, searing pain settled into her skin, radiating outward. The entire plane went silent. Lisa didn't move. Her vision blurred, her breathing sharp and uneven. She tasted blood where her teeth had bitten into her cheek. Amanda exhaled shakily, as if the slap had been as satisfying as it was necessary. Then she smiled. "Now do you see who's in charge?" Lisa's fingers dug into the seat, her knuckles white. Amanda leaned in one last time, her breath warm against Lisa's ear. "You should have just said sorry." Then she turned, casually brushing off her uniform as she walked away. Lisa sat there, the sting of Amanda's palm burning into her skin. She could hear the shifting of passengers, the unsettled tension thick in the air. Even the ones who had laughed before weren't laughing now. Amanda had gone too far. Lisa remained in her seat, the sting of Amanda's slap still burning against her skin. The plane hummed steadily as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath Amanda's feet without her realizing it. The passengers, once entertained, now sat in uneasy silence, avoiding Lisa's gaze. Even those who had laughed before weren't sure how to react anymore. Amanda had won, or so she thought. The change started subtly. Sophie, the junior flight attendant, had returned to the galley, her fingers nervously adjusting the cuffs of her uniform. She had stayed quiet throughout the entire ordeal, but that slap, had been too much. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Amanda had pushed beyond what was acceptable. Her tablet vibrated against the counter. She glanced at the screen, expecting a routine update from the airline. Instead, a priority message flashed across the display, sent directly from corporate headquarters. Her stomach dropped. Her eyes darted to the sender, Senior Operations Director Thomas Reed. The message was brief, but it was enough to make her blood run cold. "Sophie, urgent. Confirm status of Lisa Carter immediately." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she tapped out a response. "Lisa Carter? She's in economy. Had a seating issue." "Why?" The reply came almost instantly. "What do you mean she's in economy? Get her back to first class now." Sophie's heart pounded. She turned toward the cabin, suddenly aware of just how massive of a mistake had been made. Lisa Carter. That name. She had heard it before, but where? She froze. Lisa Carter wasn't just anyone. She wasn't a regular first-class passenger. She wasn't some random woman who had accidentally bought an expensive ticket. Lisa Carter was one of the most powerful women in the industry, and Amanda had just spent the last 5 hours publicly humiliating her. Sophie's throat tightened. This wasn't just a mistake. This was career-ending. She turned, panic setting in, and locked eyes with Amanda across the cabin. Amanda, sensing movement, arched a brow. "What now?" she asked, annoyed. Sophie swallowed hard, stepping closer, her voice urgent but hushed. "We have a problem." Amanda scoffed. "The only problem here is that she flicked her chin toward Lisa, still thinks she's important." Sophie gripped Amanda's wrist, her fingers ice cold. "No," she whispered harshly. "You don't understand." Amanda's amusement faltered. Sophie's voice barely rose above a breath. "Lisa Carter is the wife of Daniel Carter." Amanda blinked, unbothered. "So?" Sophie's stomach churned. "Daniel Carter, CEO of Orion Air, the airline that OWNS this plane." Amanda's smile vanished. A chill crept up her spine, cold, suffocating, absolute. Her gaze snapped toward Lisa, who was still sitting perfectly still, the bruise forming on her cheek a silent reminder of Amanda's greatest mistake. Lisa knew. She had known this entire time. Amanda's mouth went dry. The air felt thick, suffocating. She had spent the entire flight tearing Lisa apart, stripping her of dignity, making her a laughingstock. And now Lisa Carter held her entire future in the palm of her hand. And then Lisa did something that made Amanda's blood turn to ice. She smiled. The shift in the air was undeniable. The laughter, the smug glances, the whispered taunts, all of it had died the moment Lisa reached for her phone. Amanda had spent hours turning her into a spectacle, orchestrating her humiliation with precision. Now she stood frozen, an unspoken dread creeping through her body as Lisa, with the same calm demeanor she had carried since the beginning, made a call that would decide Amanda's fate. The murmurs in the cabin had changed. The same passengers who had mocked Lisa now watched with silent intrigue. They had spent the entire flight believing she was powerless, a joke, someone they could ridicule without consequence. Now, as Lisa spoke in low, measured tones, they began to realize the truth. Amanda realized it too, but far too late. Lisa's voice was quiet, her words clipped and professional. There was no anger, no raised tone, just cold efficiency. Whatever response she received on the other end was brief, because within seconds, she ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. A sick feeling curled in her stomach. She had never been afraid of consequences before. She had always been the one with power. But now, standing there with the weight of Lisa's gaze pressing down on her, she felt it slipping away, unraveling in real time. The other flight attendants had gone rigid. Sophie looked pale, her fingers twitching at her side. The male attendant who had snickered along with Amanda earlier suddenly found interest in adjusting the placement of the drink cart. No one spoke. No one dared to. The same people who had enabled Amanda, who had smirked and whispered and watched Lisa suffer, were now pretending they weren't there. Cowards. Amanda forced herself to move, to salvage control. She straightened her shoulders, forcing out a breath that was meant to sound unimpressed, but the slight tremor betrayed her. She needed to say something, do something, anything to regain footing. But what could she possibly say? The realization was like ice in her veins. There was nothing. Lisa had made one call and ended her career. Amanda's mind raced, searching for a way out, a loophole, some sliver of control. But the cold truth settled in her gut. She had none. The plane jolted slightly as the intercom crackled, signaling their descent. The captain's voice came through, instructing passengers to return to their seats, buckle their belts, prepare for landing. Amanda barely heard it. All she could focus on was the way Lisa hadn't moved an inch, the way she sat, poised, patient, completely at ease, while Amanda stood there like a fool. Passengers were still watching. Not all, but enough. Enough to see Amanda's fall from grace in real time. Enough to know that Lisa Carter wasn't just another passenger. Enough to recognize that they had been wrong. Amanda turned, searching for anything, a lifeline, an ally, a way to reverse what had just happened. But no one met her eyes. The passengers who had encouraged her cruelty now looked away, pretending they hadn't taken part in it. Even the man who had thrown money at Lisa sat stiffly, his jaw tight, his phone suddenly fascinating. The blonde woman who had laughed the loudest now stared blankly at the seat in front of her, her fingers anxiously twisting the hem of her sleeve. Amanda felt sick. She turned to Sophie, but the younger woman wouldn't meet her gaze. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. She was alone. For the first time since stepping onto this plane, Amanda Brooks had no control. The plane continued its descent, the city lights below coming into view as the cabin dimmed for landing. Amanda's thoughts spiraled, grasping for something, anything, but her mind was blank, swallowed by a crushing weight of inevitability. She could feel it now, what Lisa must have felt, that sense of helplessness, of being backed into a corner with no way out. But unlike Lisa, Amanda had no quiet strength, no calm defiance. She had built herself on the belief that she was untouchable, that her actions had no consequences. Now, with the cold finality of Lisa's words settling in her bones, she understood how wrong she had been. The wheels touched the runway. The plane rumbled, slowing as it taxied toward the gate. Amanda's pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to wake up, to rewind, to undo everything, but she knew there was no turning back. She had sealed her own fate. As the plane came to a full stop, the finality of it all crashed down on her. Passengers unbuckled their belts, stretching, reaching for their bags. Some whispered, a few stole glances at Lisa, but no one spoke. The energy in the cabin was different now, heavier, thick with the knowledge that something had shifted. Amanda didn't move. She couldn't. Then, as if twisting the knife deeper, Lisa finally turned her head, meeting Amanda's gaze one last time. Just that same knowing, patient, victorious look. Amanda's throat tightened. The doors unlocked. The flight attendants prepared for departure, their movements quick, robotic. The passengers began to stand, collecting their belongings, stretching their legs. Amanda barely felt her legs as she stepped off the plane. The terminal was bright, the artificial lights harsh against her skin. Every sound, The rolling of suitcases, the chatter of passengers, the announcements over the intercom felt distant, drowned beneath the dull roar in her head. She wasn't even sure how she had made it this far. She couldn't remember walking, couldn't remember anything past the moment Lisa had given her that final, knowing glance before stepping off the plane. She still hadn't processed what had happened. She had been at the top, untouchable, in control. And now she had nothing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It had been vibrating non-stop since Lisa made that call. She didn't have to check to know what the messages said. She was done. The airport staff was avoiding her. The same people who used to greet her with polite smiles and nods now refused to meet her eyes. The airline manager had called her name over the loudspeaker the moment she stepped into the terminal. She knew what was coming. There was no point in delaying it. She made her way to the executive office, her footsteps heavy. The woman at the front desk barely looked at her before handing her a crisp white envelope. Amanda took it with cold fingers, staring at the words printed across the top. Termination notice. Her breath caught. Even though she had known it was coming, seeing it in writing made it real. The letter was short, impersonal. Effective immediately. All access revoked. No severance. No recommendations. No chance for appeal. And at the bottom, in neat, unforgiving print, Amanda Brooks is permanently prohibited from working in commercial aviation. The paper trembled in her hands. She was blacklisted. Every airline, every private jet service, every executive flight company. It was over. All of it. She staggered backward, her body numb, her brain unable to process the finality of it. For years, she had believed herself untouchable. She had ruled the first-class cabin like it was her own kingdom, controlling who deserved respect and who didn't. But now she was no one. The hallway outside the office felt endless as she walked, the weight of her termination letter burning in her hands. She passed flight attendants she had worked with for years, but none of them spoke to her. Some glanced at her, eyes filled with something between pity and satisfaction. Others didn't even bother looking up. She was a ghost, already erased from their world. Then she heard it, a soft ping from a nearby phone. A second later, another, then another. A chill ran down Amanda's spine. She turned, heart pounding, as she saw a group of passengers gathered near a row of charging stations, their faces lit up by their screens. Someone gasped. Another person let out a low whistle. A man muttered, "Damn, she's everywhere." Amanda's fingers dug into her palms. She knew, before she even checked. The video had gone viral. Her stomach twisted. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone, her notifications flashing like 1,000 tiny death sentences. Trending now. Hashtag Amanda Brooks, hashtag first class disgrace, hashtag power trip flight attendant. Her own face stared back at her from the screen, frozen mid-slap, Lisa's head snapping to the side. The caption beneath it was ruthless. Amanda Brooks, former flight attendant, abuses passenger before finding out she's the CEO's wife. Instant karma follows. The clip had been cut perfectly, edited to capture every moment of her downfall. The way she had mocked Lisa, the way she had poured juice on her, the way she had slapped her, and finally, the way Lisa had calmly, effortlessly ended her career with a single phone call. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments. She forced herself to scroll. This woman just ruined her own life in 7 hours. Lisa is a queen for handling it with grace. I would have sued immediately. You can feel the moment she realized she ed up. Airlines need to start vetting their staff better. This is disgusting. It was over. Her hands trembled as she locked her phone, shoving it into her bag as if that could make the nightmare disappear. But it didn't. Her name was everywhere now, linked forever to this scandal. Even if she somehow escaped the blacklist, no one would ever hire her. No airline, no luxury service, no corporate position. She had lost everything, and the world was laughing. 3 months later, the uniform was stiff, uncomfortable, the fabric itching against Amanda's skin. She adjusted the collar, trying to ignore the heat of the kitchen. The clatter of dishes and the murmur of customers filled the air. She kept her head down, focused on wiping the counter. Don't look up. Don't make eye contact. Just work. But then a voice. You look familiar. Her fingers stiffened around the rag. She knew that voice. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her gaze. A young man stood in front of the counter, studying her with narrowed eyes. His phone was in his hand, the screen already bright with a paused video. Her video. Amanda's throat tightened. The man's lips curled into a slow, knowing smirk. "Oh my God," he said, amusement dripping from every syllable. "You're that flight attendant, aren't you?" The laughter, the whispers, the headlines, the humiliation, it would never end. She grabbed the rag and turned away, praying he wouldn't say anything louder. But she knew, deep down, that it didn't matter. Amanda Brooks, once the queen of first class, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. And the world would never let her forget it. The end. What was your favorite moment in Lisa's revenge? Do you think Amanda got what she deserved, or should the punishment have been worse? Let us know in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching from today?